Ivo Segovic is a winemaker, and his home is on the Adriatic coast of Croatia. This is not a vintner who directs from the comfort of his easy chair. He rolls up his sleeves and gets in there. He picks grapes. He works. He has a hand in every step of the process, and when it's time to take the first sips, you can bet he's there too. We descend into a wine cellar straight out of the cask of Amontillado so that he can sample the progress of a recent vintage. It meets his approval, and he replaces the bung. Ivo turns to me and asks if I'd like to see the other cellar. He takes me to a dock in front of a house that looks like a movie set from under the Tuscan sun and tells me to put my gear into the boat. I like this guy. Croatia is an intriguing country across the Adriatic Sea from Italy. Our flight takes us across the Italian Alps, a more grand gateway I cannot imagine. Between its mainland and over 1,200 islands, Croatia enjoys almost 6,000 kilometers of coastline. We follow a lot of it along Dalmatia toward our point of entry, the famed ancient city of Dubrovnik. We'll explore more of this magical place later, but for now, long story short, we take a leisurely drive up the coast to Orević, then the ferry to Korčula, and on to our first destination, Vela Luka. Having learned at the Department of Redundancy Department not to repeat myself, I'll just use the term picturesque seaside village once, because let's face it, they're pretty much all picturesque seaside villages. Croatia's long maritime history is evident everywhere you look. Modern and, let's say, vintage vessels lie side by side. We immediately fall in love with this quaint harbor town and wonder what we could find that's within our budget. This little fixer-upper, perhaps? Dining options abound, and most are quite reasonable. At the time of our visit, the rate of exchange was a tad over 14 kuna for $1, which means that this glass of ice cream was only about $2. Viva la kuna! Speaking of which, since Croatia joined the European Union in 2013, one would think that you should convert your dollars to euros in order to pay for things here. If you do, get ready to hear a lot of this. No euro, kuna. It's been nice here, but we've got the urge to submerge. We head back down the coast to Juliana, where our friend Sonia is going to take us diving. Since downtown comprises a single street, it's impossible to get lost in this coastal community. This has to be one of the coolest places on earth to be a kid. There are plenty of places to play, and what kid doesn't want to be a pirate? An arbor of vines reveals a tiny alleyway. Just a few steps from Main Street is Barbara Dive Center and its ivy-colored halls of diving academia. Sonia's been a diver since she was just 15 years old, and her family's been in the diving business for years. We take a short stroll to the harbor where the boat awaits. To call this a beautiful place would be to damn with faint praise. The October air is a bit crisp, as is the water temperature, but forgotten in the anticipation of getting under Croatian bubbles for our first dive in the Adriatic. Regarding the undersea terrain in such a leisurely manner is the very definition of hydrotherapy. My favorite world. My Graceland. This could easily be the most relaxing dive trip I've ever made. Green fields of seagrass undulate in the slight surge, revealing a host of sea stars. This one prepares for a fast getaway. Any minute now. Sonia points out an eel who's come out for a bit of screen time. Not far away, a hermit crab seems to be learning semaphore. Eagle-Eye Sonia calls our attention toward a grassy swath where a juvenile scorpionfish works on its camouflage skills. In the dives that follow, we traverse walls and seamounts, shining our dive lights into colorful nooks and crannies along the way. Occasionally, we discover resident worms like this feather duster, inverted so as to resemble a frilly table lamp. Further along, a bristleworm seems to be telling us, "Look, but don't touch," a warning that we take to heart, knowing that these little guys can give you a sharp sting. Large schools of fish punctuate the seamounts, apparently nonplussed by the bubble-sucking bipeds in their midst. One of my favorite dive sites is called Hard Coral. I wonder why they call it that. Here in Croatia, surface intervals usually turn into a great excuse for a really good lunch. One of our favorite restaurants is right round the mountain from Juliana in another mesmerizing marine municipality, Trstenik. Some of the architecture here would look great at a Renaissance fair. Life here exemplifies how deeply the sea is ingrained into Croatia's DNA. Either directly or indirectly, pretty much everyone here makes their living from the ocean. From the restaurant, we watch as fishermen bring in fresh anchovies and sardines and pack them in ice for shipment. Of course, fishing is done in smaller scale too, as kids come of age, and the aged become kids again. Barbara Dive Center has obtained special permits from Croatian authorities allowing them to legally dive the wrecks here. Only a short distance from Juliana Harbor, this is one of them. The German torpedo boat S-57, the most popular dive site in the area. Sunk in 1944, she is now a haunting reminder of that page in Croatian history. Resembling an American PT boat, it still has a torpedo on the deck, as well as some of its guns. We play hide-and-seek with a large grouper. The grouper wins. The wreck is shallow enough as to give us plenty of time to explore it. Twisted steel on the upper bow seems to have been designed by M.C. Escher, and butterfly fish swim beneath the skeletal remains. After inspecting the old hulk from stem to stern, we clamber aboard the boat and head back to Juliana Harbor. Just a short drive away is the little town of Drace. I know that the sentence, "I could totally live here," is something I say about a lot of the places I visit, but this time, I really mean it. When I hit the lottery, I am so buying this house. You'll remember that this is where I met Ivo Segovic to take him up on the offer to show me the famous undersea wine cellar. We suit up and settle into the skiff for the short hop to the site. Before checking on the wine, Ivo takes a moment to feed the livestock at one of his fish farms. We turn on the air and drop in. The silty bottom makes things a bit murky, but stretched out before us are several collections of the famous wine. It's called Navis Mysterium, which translated from Latin means mystery ship. Navis Mysterium has won numerous international awards and is a rising star in wine and foodie culture.
开发成了水生酒窖，用来陈酿。
Krije brojne tajne, pa tako i Navis Mysterium.
For thousands of years, the amphora was the vessel of choice for the containment and shipment of such precious liquids as olive oil and wine. These clay jars and their precious contents were transported far and wide in the holds of ships. A longtime scuba diver who grew up here, Ivo discovered that the water temperature in some places remained at a near constant 57 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. In one of the slickest moves in winemaking, he decided to bottle the wine, then seal it inside clay amphorae. It is gently lowered into the Adriatic in steel racks. The Navis Mysterium wines of Edivovina are aged underwater for up to 5 years. In that time, the clay jars gain a coating of marine growth. We inspect row after row of the jars and a few bottles. And it's back to the boat. Ivo demonstrates the proper method of opening the bottle by cutting through the triple layer of wax protecting the cork from seawater. Displaying a technique gained over years of experience, he checks for color and clarity, and most importantly, for taste. This is the life. Dive tourists visiting the area don't have to make arrangements with the boss to see amphora-encased bottles of Navis Mysterium. Through special arrangements with Edivovina, Barbara Dive Center has been granted access to a small cache of amphorae and bottles just a few minutes outside Juliana Harbor. In water much more clear and shallow than that of the secret cellar, we can make close inspections of the clay jars. We leave the wine where we found it and make a leisurely dive around the area before heading back to the boat and a good night's sleep. The next morning, we make our way to another charming coastal community. This is Janina, home of Edivovina, the winery founded by longtime friends and business partners Edi Bajurin and Ivo Segevic, Ed Ivo. Their wine shop and welcome center is perhaps the most famous landmark in town.
While diving for all of my life, I have discovered that on depth of 20 meters is the perfect storage for the wines because the temps are constant. It is 15 Celsius degrees during the whole year. Silence and darkness, which is the most important thing for the wine, and me and my partner made a discovery, and then that is the reason why we started storing our wines underwater. When we stored wines just in regular bottles, there was no way to protect the wine from the light, and that is the reason why we started to storing them in amphoras, because as I said, darkness is a very important thing for storing the wine. And that brings us to idea how to make a blend between sea and wine together. You can see the bottle there. So my partner, Eddie, received as a gift one bottle of wine on which is a piece of real antique amphora from the Roman age, and that is how we occurred to store the wine in amphora. Speaking of amphoras, we are the only company in the world that produce wine which are stored in amphoras, but I saw that there are few wineries who are storing wines underwater, but just in glass bottles. This process is very important because the wine which is stored in amphoras is more drinkable, and it has better quality and better taste from the one that was stored only in cellar. So our wine is very special because when you drink the wine, which is excellent, you always have Navis Mysterium amphora as a souvenir for a lifetime.
From the decor to the amphorae themselves, everything here evokes a sense of adventure and intrigue on the high seas. When the amphorae are brought back from under the sea, they are jet washed, laid out to dry, then packaged for sale. Some of it is distributed to other lucky countries, but much of it is sold here. Most people retain the amphora as a treasured keepsake long after the wine inside becomes a happy memory. Our time in Croatia is almost at an end. But before we take leave of this remarkable country, we spend a few days in the ancient city of Dubrovnik. This UNESCO World Heritage Site boasts architecture from Gothic, Renaissance, and Baroque periods. No wonder it resonates with location scouts from Game of Thrones. Fans will recognize a lot of these locations from the show, including the infamous Walk of Shame scene in Season 5. And for you Mel Brooks fans, there, Wolf. There, Castle. The Irish playwright George Bernard Shaw said of the walled city, "Those who seek paradise on earth should come to Dubrovnik." Ironically, the world's first quarantine was imposed here in 1377. This place is a virtual history lesson with red tile rooftops. The tiles themselves tell a harrowing story. During Croatia's quest for independence in 1991, the Yugoslav army lobbed mortar fire over the hills and onto the old city. This lasted several months. Nowadays, looking over the city from its walls, you can see which roofs were spared and which had to be replaced. In 1783, Dubrovnik Republic became the first country in the world to recognize a spanking new nation I like to call the United States. By the way, Croatia is also where the necktie was invented. The walled city is a non-stop photo op, but the miles of stairs and climbing narrow alleyways make me wish I hadn't missed leg day at the gym. The upside? This has to be the best place in the world to snap vertical photographs. Local artisans and farmers in traditional costumes ply their wares on market day. Olives abound, both whole and pressed into oil. I relieve this congenial beekeeper of a few jars of sage honey. He explains that a decrease in bee populations, caused by overuse of pesticides, is threatening his craft. This building, dating back to the 15th century, was home to the so-called chief citizens here. We would now call them mayors. They were appointed and obligated to reside here without their families during their tenure. Fortunately for them, that only lasted 1 month each. They knew a thing or two about term limits. At less than 100 feet in length, the nearby Umbra River is one of the shortest rivers in the world. I don't know if it's what feeds these ornate water fountains, but it tasted great and I didn't die, so I've got that going for me. Thousands of people drink from these things every day. Dubrovnik is one of the most popular tourist destinations in the world, and Selfie Nation has invaded big time. It's gotten so bad that the current mayor, whose term is presumably more than a month, wants to cut in half the number of daily visitors. Right now, that stands at about 8,000 people. If statues could talk, this one might be saying, "Dude, seriously?" Pigeons in the old city are downright diabolical and even try to get the drop, or droppings, on passing tourists. "Thanks for playing our game, here's a nice parting gift." Dude, seriously? As we knew it must, the sad time has come. We clean the pigeon poo from our clothes and head to the airport. I have to start saving up to buy that house. It will be mine. Oh yes, it will be mine. From Croatia and the Adriatic Sea, I'm Polkater Deaton, and I'll see you under the bubbles.